So welcome everyone to, I think it's the 13th global meeting of Open the Doors, unless I'm mistaken. So welcome to everyone today. Firstly, we say here the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, which we do, but we also acknowledge all First Nations people around the world. And for me, I'm meeting on the land of the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians of the land and waterways where I'm sitting. We acknowledge and pay our respects to all First Nations people, past and present, and extend that respect to any First Nations people joining us today. And we also acknowledge our friends who are living with dementia and commit to advocating with them as we strive to ensure that they live in a humane, meaningful, connected, and respectful manner. Now, the next part is to say, who is Open the Doors? But can you put your hand up if you don't yet know what Open the Doors 2030 is? Nicole, is that you? No, I don't see many. But I'll say, go to the Open the Doors website if you don't, and you'll learn a bit more about it today, obviously. But Open the Doors is for you not only to express how you feel re the changes needed for dementia and aged care, but also a safe place for you to showcase your amazing work, allow you to no longer work in silos and to connect with global thought leaders like the two global thought leaders we have today, and I'm going to introduce in a minute. Just some housekeeping, please do. There's not many cameras on, or it might just be me. Please keep your cameras on unless you're doing anything inappropriate. Well, then still cameras on, actually. Mute, please. Put yourself on mute until you're ready to ask a question. But please do continue immediately to put questions into the chat function. Josephine, I think, is going to be monitoring the chat and facilitating the Q&A a bit later. So we will have a Q&A, 5-minute Q&A after each presenter. Now, I'm just going to introduce our two presenters for today in reverse order. So after Beth, Jason Burton's going to speak. Now, Jason is a highly experienced dementia specialist, educator and consultant, senior aged care manager with well over 30 years experience in research and education. I'm not going to read his full and impressive CV there, but Jason's, I think, and your title, I think, Jason, is Associate Executive Director of Dementia Training Australia here in Australia, and has vast experience also from the UK in the past. And in recent times has been extremely busy with DTA on the new standards framework, which I'm guessing he might talk about today. But first, we're welcoming Beth Nolan. So Beth A. Nolan, Ph.D, is from Positive Approach to Care, or PAC, a training and advocacy organisation offering techniques used by professionals and families working or living with dementia and other brain changes. Dr. Beth has received her PhD in applied gerontology from the Uni of Kansas and has master's degrees in a number of topics. But she now serves as the Chief Public Health Officer and is a mentor and a trainer at PAC, where she works to help more caregivers to become care partners. Now, just before we get slides up, are we going to try to do a group photo? Just to mention also, we are recording, and if you want a group photo, who's going to try and do the photo, or are we going to move on? We're going to try and do a photo?
We can do it from here. Everyone's ready. We can put our big smiles on and do print screenshot. 1, 2, 3. Oh, no. Just one more second. We've got not enough faces on there. Yeah, it's not enough. There's only like 5 of us, but we all look great. All 5 of us look amazing. Don't care what the other 40 are doing. We'll just don't even save that one. Just try again, because there's not enough people. So everyone put their cameras on. Full screen. Yep. Now we're talking. We've got 7 of us. Okay. Shane. We're just trying to get some more people tiled. There we go. Now we're cooking with gas. Cameras on. Oh, yay. All stunning. All right. Let's do it. Print screen. Love it. We're done. You can all stop posing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And have we got Beth's slides ready?
We can. You can go ahead and start it actually at like the third slide. I grabbed a bunch of visuals. So you can go right on down to like the third slide, I think. So I wanted to grab a couple of visuals. Keep going, actually, if it's. Just grabbed a couple of visuals for you guys. So thank you all for coming, either late at night or early in the morning, wherever you are. And I keep going. If you go to slide 3, I think it is the third. There we go. Okay, cool. So hi, everybody. I'm Beth, and I've got about 12 minutes to try to give you a little bit of an idea of how it is we might be able to incorporate training to actually change our relationships. So I work for a Positive Approach to Care, and some of you guys may know who TIPA is. So TIPA believes in what we've got here up here as our hand, our core beliefs. And the cool thing about it is that it is not only what we always carry around with us, but it is also the thing that, well, we can share with other people. We can give people a thumbs up. We can actually touch people with this. And the way we look at this is that all of what we do, try to, is based on relationships. So we point at ourselves and point to everybody else around us. It's truly an authenticity. It's actually an empowerment. And we're actually talking about this one, empowerment. Empowerment in some ways means I've actually taken your power, or someone has stolen your power, and it's my right to give it back. So we're in discussions about whether or not actually empowerment is the right word. But it's truly based in compassion, the one where in the States we put our ring finger on. But also finally, and most importantly, this well-forgotten pinky is curiosity. Because with curiosity, I might actually be able to figure out something I don't know or I'm unaware of. So I think that this group, from my exposure to you guys, is ready to go into a pretty, well, in-your-face sort of thought. So I'm going to do something that we don't normally get to talk about straight up. And there's a slide that I think is 2 slides down. And it's this one. And it's a little bit harsh. It's a solid look in the mirror to think about when it comes to interacting with someone who is living with a different brain than yours, that has come to a place where there's some skills that are changing for them. But it's whether or not we, the people that are choosing to be here in relationship with somebody else, whether or not we are actually getting the task done together. Because what we understand and what we think now, looking at things, is that a lot of times people sort of give up. They think they're here in the middle in care. But the reality is that what they may actually be doing without permission is neglect. This idea where I give up doing a task because you've told me no. And sometimes we think that that's person-centered or that's appropriate. But if I use too many words, if I use things to confuse you, if something about me is not a right match, I don't get permission, and you have a right to tell me no. But have I set you up for failure? The reality is unless we have skill to gain that permission, is neglect. But the other side of that, if in fact I actually push forth the task, because at some point I've determined day 27 and you haven't had even a wash up, you know what, for health and safety, I just need to get it done. And whether I use drugs as a restraint or more than one person as a restraint, that's what we're talking about, abuse. So for me, training is about how it is I get permission to do some of the most intimate things on the planet. So I'm going to show us a quick couple of videos here and take a look at what's the difference between a caring caregiver and a skilled caregiver that gets permission. Go for it.
Tipa, 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 Tipa. Hey.
Hey,
Hey. How's your coffee doing?
that's fine.
Yeah, it is your coffee. Looks like you're out.
I'm fine.
Let's go get some coffee. Come on.
You go on and get coffee.
All right. So, Tipa,
Yeah.
some coffee?
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. That'd be fine.
Let's go.
Yeah, you should go.
Tipa,
What?
do you want me to get it? Or
Yeah,
you want to
you
come?
get it.
Okay. All right. Give me
You
your
get
cup.
it. No, you go get
Well,
it
I
and
thought
bring
you-
it.
I thought you wanted some coffee.
I do.
Well, let's go.
Just never mind.
Come on.
Don't come on. Just get out. I don't like
I
you.
thought she wanted some coffee. She usually likes coffee.
So what do you guys think that Teepa gets labeled as?
Difficult.
Yeah. She's just one of those difficult people, and you got to have a lot of patience. But is she? Now, the reality is I see a lot of amazing things that caring Melanie did. So what were some of the things to give her some grace that you saw? Yeah, she's not really being listened to, is she? She's really going to be labeled as non-cooperative, probably at best, right? So what were some of the things that you noticed that Melanie did well? Not to go too deep into this, but just point out a few things you recognize. For example, we know about sometimes when words get too much, adding a visual. Oh, she was friendly. She tried to slow down. Yeah, but she needs to slow down. It was a little fast, wasn't it? Okay. Well, for the sake of time, let's look at it skilled Melanie. So go ahead and fast forward 2 slides here. I think the next 2 away is the next video. Yeah, she's a bit over the top. Thank you, Bobby. Yes, I was waiting for somebody to point it out. Drives me crazy. This idea that the minute somebody gets brain change, that suddenly you're going to talk to me differently. You're going to use a different tone. You're going to say, oh, she's so sweet. Yeah, Bobby and I will sit next to each other and smack everybody when they talk to us that way, right? Yeah, talk to me like I'm an adult that I am. So now let's look at actually skilled Melanie.
Tifa.
Hey,
Hey.
hey, how are you?
Good. It's Melanie.
It's what?
Melanie.
Oh, Melanie.
Yeah.
I'm Teepa.
You are Tifa.
Yeah,
Good.
those are pretty.
You like those?
Yeah,
Like
those are nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, they go with the thing.
They match.
Yeah.
Yeah, they kind of go.
They well, yeah,
Yeah.
they're the similar or
Similar.
there's some other one that goes.
There's some
there.
other one.
Like the similar, but not similar, something else.
Something else.
Yeah, so wish I could think of that.
I do too.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. It's something.
Something. Well, I like yours as well. How's your coffee holding up?
Well, it's empty.
Oh
There's
no,
just, and look, somebody put what they put in there.
that's not right.
Well, no, it's supposed to. What's the other thing you take?
Medicine
No, well, no, it's just
with
look.
the water.
See that?
It's
yeah,
water. With water.
Water. It's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
water. I thought it was gonna be
Coffee.
the coffee, and it
Yeah.
isn't. It's just water.
It's just
see,
water.
see it?
It's not right.
Well, it's okay, but I don't much like it.
Tifa,
Uh-huh.
let's go get some coffee.
Oh, you know how to get it?
I do.
Oh, well, okay. Wait a minute. Here, you gonna hold that? Give me a second. I've been here a little bit of time. Okay.
Hey, Tifa.
Yeah. Well, that's fine, isn't it? But we wanted coffee.
Coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Let's go
okay.
get some.
Well, let's go get some.
Let's go.
Good idea.
Good idea.
So you can bring on down the slides. So I'm watching what you guys are coming up with in the chat. You can just drop those if you want. And just bring up the people. You know, it's interesting. You guys talked about this idea of not taking over. This idea of truly using body language and verbal cues. This idea of slowing down. It's a slowing down. Do this, guys. It's about a match. Now, many of you guys know who Teepa Snow is. And in this case, she is definitely demonstrating. She's not actually a person living with dementia. But watching that video, Teepa was true to self. And would you say someone who doesn't like her stuff touched, strong introvert or extrovert, all about the connection? Yeah, I saw Linda mouth it. There's an introvert. And while it's not necessarily something I want to go into and touch anybody else's stuff, the reality is that stuff and a little bit of sense of boundaries for an introvert is really important. So even just the point of tapping on the table, the little subtle things we can actually operationalize the way the brain and the body works together. And that's how TIPA's program works. We have taken what's happening in the brain and the body, regardless of dementia. Now, how many of you guys are introverts and just love it when somebody goes to your stuff? Mm-hmm. Yeah, Linda's like, yeah, I'm an introvert. I'm not going to touch my stuff. This idea that this program, or the fact that we need to teach people how it is you approach, get connected, and actually get going with somebody living with dementia, is that fundamentally different from any one of us living with neurotypical aging? I'm going to call BS. And I would say the reality is that we can operationalize this, because I challenge any one of you, the next time you're on a plane, the next time you're on a bus, the next time you're sitting quite close to strangers, and let's say you drop something between their feet, or even let's say between their legs on the seat, do you think you'll be able to retrieve your favorite pen back? I think you're skilled enough to do it. And I also think you're skilled enough not to reach in and just grab it from between their crotch. These are skills that we can build on, that are based on the way that the body says, this person's okay. This person's okay. And even more so, the reality is, when we actually look at some of our specific techniques, when I actually get in and get connected through hand-to-hand contact, once I have permission, by offering a hand and you shake it back, we actually can come into that place where my brain and your brain continually tell each other through neuro and synaptic connections that we are here, we are okay, and we are connected. And when it comes to actually looking at this idea of what we think is care, but is actually neglect, or worse yet, abuse, especially with the way that we as supervisors, that we as family members that are just wanting mom to be as she was before, the way all of us deserve to have education regardless of brain function. It comes down to, well, that's the reality. I know how to get in and get connected. Why are we changing that when it comes to living with brain change? So that's our program. This idea that I have a way to operationalize, break down the way in which we can get connected and do things together that are relatively intimate. It's a hard one. So we're actually coming specifically to Australia. We have courses all the time in the US, but we also have a lot of free online stuff. And I think the very last slide on there has a couple of links. If you haven't just Googled TIPA Snow, and I'll put that in there because that is a funny one, especially with my weird accent. And it's a weird name even in the States. TIPA Snow, just Google her on YouTube. We have so much stuff. But the very last slide on that, there's a list of a series of links. May not be the last slide. There may be some copyright slides. And I think it's the third to the last slide. That actually has a couple of links of some manageable amounts of video data. But you are also welcome to reach out to me and find out more about how our training works, because you don't have to go all the way through and spend hours and hours. Just beginning that journey of finding what is possible can actually make a difference. Because I can tell you, for some of you who actually are out there, and I know there's one person that'll be listening to this later, there is a way to do it. And it has to do with relationships. And it has to do with reciprocity in the relationship. So I'm getting something out of this relationship just as much as you are. Sometimes I'm here to support the skills that someone is no longer able to do. But it also is a place where we both are getting our needs met. So thank you guys for spending this time together. I wanted to keep this a little bit brief and make sure we had time for questions and for Michael's as well, because I forgot to set my timer. And there's an important part. My brain, the hippocampus, wasn't able to hold on to time as I was talking through. We'll worry about whether or not I have that brain change as well.
I think
so
you
much,
did very
Beth.
well for time.
Oh, how'd I do? I'm curious, actually.
Pretty much on exactly on
13
time.
minutes. 13 minutes, Beth. So not too bad.
Can have another 2
Not
minutes.
bad.
So let's hand over to some questions. I can see Josephine, you're ready to go.
You bet. Ready to go. I'll just allow anyone to raise their hand. There's a lovely little speaking of hands, Beth, there's a little hand at the bottom of the screen if you want to raise your hand virtually. Otherwise, you can put your comments or your questions in the chat. I love how you ended that, Beth. I've always said that caregiving was the wrong word we chose to use because it isn't about just giving. It's about giving and receiving. And so that reciprocity is essential to the equation. Otherwise, it's unbalanced, isn't it?
It is. And it's really, I think it's not to be said lightly, because I know in a paid caregiving situation, that really does change things. But the reality is that my friends living with dementia, they know exactly when I want to be elsewhere, regardless of where they are in the disease. And I even had a friend one time when I decided, there's a bunch of other people going out late, and it was a place in which brain change had really had an effect, and it was exhausting. You're right. It is care partners walking together. And she actually told me and said, she turned to me. At this point, she had about 1 or 2 words in any sentence. And she's like, she kind of nodded and like pointed at the folks that were leaving. She's like, indicating I wanted to go out with them for drinks late at night. And I thought to myself, just by her asking that, I recognized, no. And I turned to her and I said, I am exactly where I want to be. And that's with you. And if I hadn't answered anything other than truthfulness, the bottom line is, I'm not stupid. I have dementia. That's the reality. And if the one part of the brain that's actually surviving to the very end of the disease is our amygdala is our threat perceiver. It's also our needs meter and our pleasure seeker, but it helps us recognize what is off, what is wrong. And to the very last breath I breathe, I'm going to know whether you're giving me a load of crap or not. That's important.
Yeah, very perceptive. They're just so resilient emotionally, you know? I think emotions are their superpower. And yeah, they know how to read a room, and they know how to read people. Yeah. I can't see the full screen. Does anyone have their hand up? Usually I see like a hand has gone up.
It's a quiet night with all the videos down, I have to say. Or quiet morning, I should say, for some of you.
Well, I kind of, one of the reasons why this movement even exists in the first place is because people aren't opening the doors, whether it's for fear or whether they've challenged or they've tried a way and it didn't work. I'm sure you've come across resistance in your training and through the program. Would you mind sharing maybe a challenge and how you overcame it with a person?
A challenge in the context of training when we're training family care partners or paid care partners, or something else in terms of
maybe even like a mindset shift, like how, I'm sure you have a lot of resistance in terms of people's thoughts and beliefs about this new approach.
I think it comes down to this idea that we talked about earlier, is either lacking in curiosity, my ability and my brain state, my functioning to be able to be curious about the other person. We talk about it in terms of agenda. So for example, there are times when, let's say I was another friend of mine living with dementia. We knew there was scheduled fire alarms to go off. So we had talked about this. We knew they were going to be really intense in this hotel we were at. We're doing a co-speaking event together. And for her, having Lewy body sounds as well as lights going off were going to be incredible. So my offer to her was, we could actually see about getting out before they start. And eventually she was like, yeah, let's do that. So we started to make our way to the elevator, and that's when they went off. We ended up sitting down because walking at that point wasn't an option. And it was a real challenge to find the moment to break through the noise and actually get that connection. I really had to breathe because I knew in my heart, my agenda was, I've got to get her outside, to get away from this noise and this flashing lights. That was my agenda. But if I push it, I'm not going anywhere. So this idea that I can be there, call her name, wait, pause, have my hand visible, but notice where my body went. It's an offer, still her choice. And if she's able to wait long enough, eventually she took my hand because she knew I was there as a friend. And I was like, hey, got her eyesight. Let's go. From friend to friend. We finally made it out of the building. And it was a good 20 minutes or so before she was able to recover. And I think that's the piece It's whether or not our agenda supersedes the moment. And I just grab her by the shoulders and say, we're going outside because I know that this is too much for you. I would never do that to another adult. And in a lighter sense, think about the strangeness of care partnering. How many times we have to do things that are just odd to another human being, because the reality is, I don't know about you guys, but here in the States, we're a little bit puritanical. I can actually count the number of people who I have, sounds a little racy, but allowed to get into my pants. So the reality is that how is it that you are going to help me feel comfortable when we have got to do things that, in terms of our desire together to help me feel better, feel more clean, feel comfortable, without it feel like you're just getting in my pants? We can do this together. And that's the piece where it makes it skillful. We're talking about some odd things here. And if we're not willing to talk about them now, we won't be able to talk about them later. So there's a little bit of levity there.
Love it. I'll pass it back to you, Michael. Thanks so much, Beth.
Thanks very much. And we'll have some more time at the end to do some more Q&A. But Jason, are you ready to present? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Michael. Good morning, everybody. I'm very privileged to come to you from the land of the Whadjuk people in Western Australia. So it's still morning for me. I haven't had my first coffee yet, so we'll see how this next 15 minutes goes. But I thought I'd just split my session into 3 parts, and we've only got 15 minutes, so it's going to be brief in each part. But when I talked to Michael about the focus of these talks, we talked about training, but then for me, training is just a means to an end in many ways. Training is just the means in which we build capability and our capacity to actually change the lived experience of people living with dementia. And so I really wanted to start with person-centered care, and very briefly talk about, I guess, something that was planted, a seed that was planted in my head many years ago now, by a gentleman who was living with dementia, and we were sharing a beer together at an ADI conference. And he said to me something that just stuck with me and resonated with me. And I've been on this person-centered care journey from the beginning. I'm old enough and long enough in the tooth to remember Tom Kitwood personally, and went to Bradford University. So I was fortunate to be at the vanguard of his work, and pushing that culture change. But what this guy said to me really sort of made me, I guess, stop in my tracks and think a bit differently. And he said to me, Jason, what I don't think you get as professionals is that person-centered care isn't about what you do. It's really about how you are with me. And I sat and pondered on that for quite a long time, and we had a big, long discussion about it. And it made me start to think about why, after nearly 40 years now of that seminal work by Kitwood, do we still struggle so much with this concept, and certainly in the application of this concept? And we're at an exciting time in Australia, because we're about to, for the very first time, really embed person-centered care in our systematic approach to aged care. It's not something we've really done before, but the new standards and the Aged Care Act, right throughout it flows this concept of person-centeredness. And so I wanted to share with you a little bit of thinking that I've been doing around flipping person-centered care in our heads a little bit as practitioners and as organizations. I'm really stopping to think about it as something that we do, and rather think about it as something that we are. And by that, I'm talking about using person-centeredness as a philosophical and values-based approach for who we are as people and as practitioners of people who are lucky enough to be walking alongside people living with dementia and their families, and as organizations who are trying to impact and create a culture change movement. So if we think about person-centeredness as a being rather than a doing, it might help us start to link all of the pieces together. So what do I mean? Very briefly, a few concepts that I've been playing with that come out of Kitwood's work, and I've just gone back to his very first pieces of work, really, and those very first lectures that I went to with him. I'm thinking about where he started, really, which was, and we've kind of, I think, lost a little bit of the essence of it. So the first one is we are the same. Okay, the first two are actually an oxymoron of each other, but the first one is we are the same. And by that, I mean as intrinsically human beings, whether you have a diagnosis of dementia or you have memory problems that hasn't yet been diagnosed, or you don't have any cognitive impairments at this point in time, we are fundamentally still the same as human beings. Why is that so important? Because I think Beth touched on it when she said about don't talk to me differently. Why do we talk to people differently because they've got dementia? It's because we view them as different to us. And therefore we start to perceive them as different. And perception leads to behavior. So when we think about our own behavior, it's very much been influenced by our perception that people living with dementia are different. And so that first one is a really critical core one. And again, when we come to training, are we actually working with our staff in our training around this concept? And I'm not sure we are. I'm not sure we're challenging ourselves enough in this space. The second one, as I said, is an oxymoron to the first one. And the first one is we are the same. And the second one is we are all different. You know, we're intrinsically the same as human beings around our needs. How we actually meet those needs, how our life experiences influence us as humans, what's important to us and how we prioritize that can be very different from person to person. And so the essence of individuality, and then what that means if I develop a cognitive impairment and how that will be respected is absolutely critical in using person-centeredness as a values-based system. So we are all the same intrinsically with and without dementia, but we are also all very different as individuals, and that needs to be respected. The next one is a really important one, and still one that you don't have to scratch the veneer of our care system very deep to see, you know, doesn't happen, is that what I do and how I do it makes a difference. And I still hear people say, well, you know, they've got memory problems, so they're not going to remember. If they've just had a bad time, they'll forget it quickly anyway. Or, well, they've got dementia, so they don't really understand what's going on. So does it really matter how we do things? My experience over the years, and I'm sure everybody else in this meeting, is that actually it's fundamental how we do things. And Beth just showed a beautiful video showing that how we do things has a massive impact on somebody's experiences living with dementia. So we've really got to ram that one home, I think, still, which is sad for me after nearly 40 years, but we're still having the same conversations and having to drive the same points. The fourth one's a person is much more than their cognitive ability. And again, we still judge people and we still use things like stage theory. We still put people into boxes based on MMSE results. You know, we still do these things that basically very subconsciously in a lot of cases actually suggest that if you've got dementia and the more that cognitive impairment progresses, the less a person you become. And as a values-based system, if we're going to use person-centered care as a values-based system, we've really got to turn that thinking around. And the last one, which could be a full 2 days workshop on its own, so I'm just going to plant the seed and leave it, is that behavior follows emotion, not diagnosis. We spend so much time thinking about behavior when in fact we really need to be looking at people's emotion and well-being. So as a person-centered philosophical approach, I think we can start to use that as our foundation, and then we can wrap around all of the other things that are now emerging, like person-led, like relationship-focused, like human rights guided and compassionate care. And we can start to wrap those models around person-centeredness, because without a person-centered foundation, it's going to be hard to do those models. And without those models, it's going to be hard to have a person-centered foundation. So I don't see them as sitting separately. I see them as intrinsically linked. So that's my thinking around person-centered care as a philosophical approach, rather than a care model that you have to implement. And I think if we start to think that way, we might get ourselves into a space that we've been trying to get into for the last 40 years. Okay, so leading on to that, what does that mean in terms of training and building our capability of our staff to be able to implement, I guess, a person-centered belief system, and then the models that we want to wrap around that, and what training should really be focused on? I guess I know training time is hard. It's hard to release staff. It's expensive. You know, you don't have much opportunity for it often. There are ways of actually addressing that, and that's a different talk in itself. But people often ask me, Jason, what would you, if you had a staff group, what would your priority in training be? And so I've thought about this, and I've thought about the time I've spent alongside people living with dementia and what worked really well and what they seem to value the most. And Beth has touched on a lot of this in her talk. So maybe if I can just bring that next slide up. So for me, it's what they call the soft skills. Although they're not soft skills, they're actually really hard skills. And they're quite difficult for people because, especially nowadays, as we move forward in the way society is changing, the way communication and interrelationships are changing, these skills, intrinsic skills that have kept us alive as human race, seem to be diminishing, and they're absolutely intrinsic to being able to be a good support person for somebody living with dementia. So, Neil, have you got the next slide that you could just show me? You're going to bring the next one up. Sanal, is the next slide there?
Give me 2 seconds, Jason. She's run away.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'll put you on the pressure now. Okay, so whilst we're waiting for the slide, I'll talk you through it. So the first one's communication, and Beth talked a fair bit about this. And communication is a skill. It's a skill you can learn. It's something, if you're not very good at, you can practice, you can learn the techniques, and you can develop it. And I've seen amazing people with not natural communication skills. Some people have really natural communication skills, and they can sit in a room and just chat to anybody and form connection. But a lot of people don't have that. And so it can be something that, thank you, but it is something that we can actually teach. And again, we don't actually spend much time on this. And this is why I'm so enamored and such an advocate for Beth and Teepa's work, because this is, the crux of that, learning those techniques that you can use. And then leading from that is connection. And communication leads to connection, but it doesn't necessarily, connection sits for me as a separate skill set, really, because you can communicate with somebody and still not really have that deep connection that we're looking for. And so, again, there's techniques and skills within the ability to connect with people, but it's often as well about us and what we bring, and being aware and having that emotional intelligence about what we bring. The third thing that I would just love to be able to, everybody in dementia care to have is the skill to be with somebody. What do I mean by that? There are times, and many times, a lot of our interaction and relationships are transactional. It's often as we as practitioners want the person with dementia to do something. If we're being honest, a lot of our time spent with people with dementia is trying to get them to do something that we want them to do. And so I found that this space that you can get into with people, and for those who know Michael Verdi, his work is very much, based around this, the ability to be with somebody, not for any purpose. I'm not trying to get you to do something, and you're not trying to get me to do something. We're just going to spend time together. And out of that time together may come some really magical moments. And I've been very blessed to have lots of those magical moments where you just have to release yourself, let go of yourself, get comfortable with that dis-ease of dementia that we have that don't have dementia, and be with somebody. And if you can do that, you start to move into a very different space as a practitioner. And the last one, which again is a skill and a culture, is bring joy in the moment. Every moment you have is an opportunity to bring joy. So how can we do that? How will we do that? What are the skills? What are the techniques you need to be able to do that? And what attributes do you need to bring? So those are the kind of, if I could only teach 4 things in dementia care and change the world so everybody had a tier 4 ability in these things, these would be my 4 things. And the last thing I'm going to talk about, because I would be remiss not to, as Michael alluded to, is that I'm super excited to say that the National Dementia Education Training Standards Framework, which is Australia's first training framework around dementia, and the skills and knowledge that you should have as a practitioner or as a carer or as somebody living with dementia, is ready to be released. And the launch event for it will be on March the 18th in Parramatta. We'll also have a launch event in Perth the following week, and then one on the Sunshine Coast as well. I'll put a link to the invite if anybody would like to come along. I'd love to meet you in person and see you there. Let me see if that'll go in. Yeah, that's good. And this framework, I think, is critically important. Lots of you in the room have been involved in it from its inception. It's a huge co-design piece of work with people living with dementia, family members, professionals, industry, department. And it really lays out the roadmap for us as a country in terms of our dementia training, what we want people to be able to do, what we want people to know, and how they can go about identifying their standards in the learning outcomes that will help them continue to develop in their dementia practitioner space. It's not only is it, I'm going to lay claim to this, but not only is it Australia's first national dementia training framework, but it's actually the first framework in the world that is encompassing of community, people living with dementia and family training needs as well. And they often get missed. The other training frameworks that have been developed, and there's some really great ones in Europe, have been for professionals. Whereas this one, we wanted to include a tier that incorporated community and family and newly diagnosed people living with dementia as well, who also have training needs. So we're going to lay claim to it being not only Australia's first, but a world first in terms of being an all-encompassing training framework around dementia. So I'm very excited to be able to launch that this month. And we will have it on the website for download. If you come along to the launch event, you get a hard copy. And we've got lots of tools and resources and things like that that will go with it to help you use the framework, both as an organization and as an individual, or as an educator if you're developing course material. And I think that's my time up.
Okay.
I thought you were on mute.
No, I was good. That's so amazing, Jason. Oh, I loved it. Right from the beginning, you had me. I was like, if it's not about what you do, it's about who you are with me. And we have to see people for who they are and not what they do. Yeah.
It was one of those light bulb moments that I've had so often when I talk with people living with dementia who just put me back on the right track. And I'm really help, as I said, it's starting to help me understand why it's been so hard for us to implement person-centered care, because I don't think we're challenging this belief system that's still sitting there.
Yeah. So I saw 2 hands go up. I tried to open the queue, but I was unsuccessful in that. So did anyone catch who that was? Chance. Maxine. Maxine, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Thank you so much. Thanks for that. Totally on the same page with being alongside someone. But what is it about having an agenda that's so important in terms of care, and why is it that we are constantly pushed to be able to achieve an outcome with the person?
It's a great question, Maxine. And again, I think when you look at culture change in aged care, you know, there's a lot of anchors that want to hold us back from making real change. There's a historical paradigm, and those historical paradigms are really important to understand because they still drive a lot of thinking and behavior and perception. So, you know, we have that medical paradigm of dementia that still permeates. As I said, we still use stage theory. We still, you know, people still talk about people in terms of MMSE scoring or cognitive, you know, where in the brain things are. You know, in training, we spend so much time talking about areas of the brain, which, you know, has an importance. You know, it's good to know about apraxias and agnosias and why it's happening, but we can't do anything about that. So let's not spend our time worrying about things we can't change. when there's so much we could actually change and we could make a difference with. But we still are very, mired in that medical model. And so we spend an awful lot of time talking about what the lobes of the brain do and all the rest of it, when for most practitioners, it really doesn't make any difference. And guess what? I've run care services, and I've never, ever had a family member say to me, I love Mary, that care worker who comes, because she knows what the temporal lobe does. They say, I love Mary because she's part of our family and she gets on with mum so well and mum just loves her to death. That's what families are looking for. That's what people living with dementia are looking for. So we are mired in the past still with our medical models, and then our systems get in the way often, I'll try not to get my soapbox, but we still have systems that drive us into language, into paradigms and perceptions that are really not helpful. I'd love that we got rid of behavior support plans and looked at well-being support plans. We still jump to the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff and fight the fires, when we know full well that if you enhance well-being and you mitigate those moments that create ill-being, the person doesn't feel stressed or anxious or scared or fearful or angry, and therefore they're not going to communicate that through behavior, but instead we go keep it straight to the behavior. So our systems often drive that. We have to tick the boxes in our Comcare systems, and we have to do our reporting to the department in certain ways, and use language that's still really inappropriate and labels people. So there's a lot of barriers to change, but having said that, there's still lots of opportunity to change, and there's people that are doing it despite the barriers, and that tells me the barriers don't necessarily mean it can't happen. It just makes it a bit harder.
Great, thank you so much.
Thanks, Maxine. Thanks for the question. I think we have time for one more question from Linda. You had your hand raised. Did you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes. Hi, Jason. I do a lot of work in the community sector as a volunteer. I'm a Dementia Australia advocate. I'm a peer leader. I'm a weaver. And I'm a founding member of the Kiama Dementia Inclusive Project, which was the first in Australia. It's been going for 10 years. My reading of Kitwood, and this really comes from having met Al Power many years ago and having chats with him, and as I see it in the community sector, people are concerned terribly much about person-to-person care, individualised care, whereas I found, for example, and I put it into practice with my late partner who died less than a year ago, that what was important was the creation of relationships. And I think we missed that with Kitwood. Because my partner, like many people with dementia, went through abandonment, really, by old friends and family, etc., because people were too scared or they wanted to remember her as she had been, the usual stuff. What was really important was creating a support team around her of different individuals, apart from me, with whom each of them, there were 3, she had unique relationships, and through those relationships she got to meet their families and go to different events and be out in the community. And I don't know how we translate that it's not so important to have the same carer every week. What's important is that when you have a changed brain, that should not prevent you from having agency within your community. And as I mentor other people whose partners have, in many cases, recently been diagnosed, or it might be a parent or it might be a sibling, I'm trying to think, how can I get that concept through, particularly with couples that have been together, say, for 50 years. And of course, the entire dynamic changes and one takes over and the other hides. How do we do this?
Yeah, a great question, Linda. And I think, again, part of my thought on it is part of the misinterpretation of Kitwood's work is that it's all about individuality.
Thank you.
It isn't. If you look at his work around dementia care mapping and the personal detractors that sit within dementia care mapping, for example, There's a lot of stuff in there that's all relationship based, that if we don't get this right, it actually has a significant effect on ill-being in people. So I think when I talked about using person-centeredness as a belief system, that first one, we are all the same, and that's about human need, and that we are, as human beings, we are predominantly social beings. We like to be part of tribes, we like to be part of packs, we like to be part of sports clubs, whatever it might be, as individuals that we use to meet that need to feel part of a social group. We look for that as human beings, and that doesn't change if you happen to develop dementia. So, I think that human needs stuff is critically important. And I love the Eden work that Al's been a big part of around those domains of well-being. Again, for me, those domains of well-being should be the core of any organization's culture model. And they're really intrinsic and important. I think, when relationships change in when you're living with dementia, that's when Michael Verdi's work for me really comes in. And us without dementia really being cognizant of how our perception of that person is changing and what that's doing in our behavior to that person, because that person is picking up all of those signals. And so it's really important. And it's really hard as a family member. I've been a family carer and cared for my grandma. She used to look after me when I was little. She got Lewy body dementia and the roles reversed, and I became her main carer. And it was really, from looking at it through a totally different lens, I was so careful, and I didn't always get it right, and we never do, to try and make sure that relationship was still there, and that what she needed out of the relationship was still there. And that's really hard as a family carer, because you've got, a lifetime of journey that you're carrying with you in that relationship. So it's really difficult. But again, just to bring it back to training, we don't train family carers. There's very little training for family carers in this space. I not so long ago did some work with an organization and ran some family carer workshops in residential care for them. And I would say probably 85% of the families there, and the room was packed every night, told me that they'd never had any dementia training, and they'd been caring for their loved one for 10 years plus. So, again, some of this stuff is skill. Some of it is opportunity to be reflective in what you're doing and having somebody lead that reflective conversation. And the rest of it is around emotional intelligence, as Nicole put, and helping people to actually delve into that for themselves and have that opportunity to question themselves in a safe environment and say, maybe I didn't get that right. Did anybody see why I didn't? That comes to a culture that needs to support that. So it's very complex, but also quite simple sometimes, as much as learning how to hold somebody's hand.
That's our job. We got to make the complex simple. This is such a great conversation. I wish it could go on and on. We had a couple more people raise their hands, but we just are going to have to tie it up for today. And hopefully we can continue some of these conversations offline as well. Monique, I'll pass it over to you.
Okay, I'll do a quick wrap up. I just want to say thank you so much, Jason and Beth. It's just been fabulous to have you. And I think there's so much that I wrote down, as always happens at this session, but I think it is very clear. It's about connection. It's about relationships. It's about community. I loved, Jason, how you spoke about having that be with your friend and about the person-centered care isn't about what you do, but how you are with the person. It's just so true. And I think if we can flip that, and I think we can absolutely help people in regards to the skills that we need that PAC offer as well. And there are many other skills, but just being able how to connect with the person, to let them lead the way is, we just think we need to enable our care staff and our families and our communities to learn and understand. And those soft skills that are actually hard, Jason, I completely agree with you. For some people have them naturally, other people need to be shown and also let known that it's okay for those soft skills to be leading the way, in regards to being in the moment, being with, connection and communication. And Linda, community, it's so important, whether it's, Vicky, you mentioned networks of care, circles of care, whatever it is. I think we're all in this together. And yeah, I just think it was wonderful. I could keep talking and talking. I could love to hear you all continue to talk as well. So I will wrap it up for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Our next event will be a Keys to the Door. We'll continue the conversation from today. In regards to speakers and dates, that's all just been finalised and locked in, but we'll ensure all of that information's in the newsletter. And for anyone in Australia, for the launch of the National Dementia Education Training Standards Framework, I think I've got it right, in New South Wales, WA and Queensland, we'll ensure that link's there, and make sure you go if you can. It's really, really important that we just grab everything we can and do everything we can. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Monique. Bye, everyone. Have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.